Yeah, it's great, thank you. So good afternoon to everybody and welcome to the decision days of the Executive Member for Highways, Councillor Russell Oppenheimer, Executive Member for Climate Change and Sustainability, Councillor Warwick, and myself, Councillor Humby, the Executive Lead Member for Economy, Transport and Environment. These decision days are being broadcast in one session live on YouTube via the County Council website. So just to explain that, we have one session with 3D days and the relevant member would chair that session when they get to their papers. So just to be clear about that. We have no deputations for this decision day, but also like to welcome Councillor Stephen Philpott, who is the Select Committee Chairman, Councillor Martin Todd, Opposition Spokesperson, and I think we have Councillor Kim Taylor as well, the Labour Spokesperson. I think she was going to attend, can't see her yet. Katie, yeah?
Yeah, she's not joined yet, yeah.
Okay, all right, but we are expecting her. Okay, so thank you for that. So we'll go straight on to agenda item 1, which is the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy. And I think Sam Horn is presenting that. So over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just by way of a very brief introduction to the paper, this is seeking approval for the Project Integra Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy. This strategy sets out the Project Integra's high-level strategic approach going forward with regards to waste management, focused primarily on an approach of partnership working and whole system cost. Very much reflects the forthcoming changes that are likely to come in as a result of the Environment Bill, and in essence looking to secure approval from all partners as part of the strategy for the new proposed new twin stream system for recycling. This will then enable the County Council to proceed with the development, investment and development of new facilities to be able to process the change collection, the changes in the materials that are collected from the curbside in terms of dry mix recycling. The strategy itself, you will notice, still in draft form. This is because each of the Project Integra partners are required to approve individually the strategy. It's not been possible to align all of the decisions at the same time, so we have a recommendation to approve the strategy, but we also have a recommendation that delegated authority is given to the Director of the Environment Department to agree the final wording of the strategy in line with any changes and decisions that are made in line with each of the individual collection authorities to be able to come to a final published version of the strategy, which will be done once all of the decisions have been made and the final wording is agreed. We don't anticipate any significant changes to the strategy. It's been developed very much as a co-authored document, both with officer and member involvement from across the partnership. So don't anticipate any significant changes, but there is that capacity for some tweaks to the wording and some probably more likely alteration of the structure. So some bits moved to appendices or kept as opposed to being kept in the main report. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions that there are on the strategy paper at this time. Thank you.
Sam, thank you very much for that. And I would just say, like many of the papers on the agenda today, has been through the Select Committee and various other sort of iterations of that and comments prior to that, and this had a very good airing earlier. So, but I know we have several people that want to speak. And I think Councillor Todd, Martin Todd, you wanted to comment on this paper first.
Yes, and I should make clear that I have a personal but not prejudicial interest because I am the portfolio holder responsible for business recovery, which includes waste and recycling at Winchester City Council, and also Vice Chair of Project Integra. So perhaps unsurprisingly, in the light of that, I am broadly in support of the joint Project Integra proposal. And I think a strength of it is those authorities and those of us who have a real hunger to further increase our recycling levels. This feels like a direction which will enable us to do so. I think we did discuss this earlier. I think from my perspective, we would like clearer embedding and focus of the climate emergency and the need to be cutting carbon. As I mentioned in an earlier meeting, it's currently assigned as a sort of good practice type thing, and I think it's deeper than that, and actually at times will lead to different choices in terms of the routes that we might take in terms of how we proceed. So I think that's a particularly important thing to do. There is a wider point. A lot of what we're doing at the moment is framed in response to the government's environment bill. I think it would be strengthened, and I think progress would be strengthened, and it may not be something you're prepared to do today, if the county was to work through for itself what its own ambitious target was, to a degree independent of government, for recycling, waste minimisation. What are the goals that it would like to see coming out of this? I think we need to have more of a discussion about that, and the county has a leadership role in unblocking that conversation and enabling us to do that. I would like, at the moment, if you look at the league table published of recycling rates amongst disposal authorities, Hampshire has the lowest rate amongst any county council. And I think it would be great if it was possible for the county, and I'd like this to be thought about and evaluated, to set an ambition of being in the top 50% of disposal authorities within the next 5 years. That doesn't feel insurmountable. It involves, at the moment, it would involve going from 41% to 49%. Obviously, we may need to go a bit further than that because all boats will be rising. But I do think it's important that the county sets an ambition. We used to be ambitious. We've allowed ourselves to drift to the bottom of the league table, and I think it's time to put a line, draw a line in the sand and say, right, we're going to fix that. We're going to, we're going to get back in the game. We want to be average above average, heading up the table in terms of how we're performing versus other parts of the country.
Okay, I'll let Sam, and I know Stuart, thank you for that. Martin might want to comment on that, and you heard some of the responses this morning, but for the benefit of the people that weren't there, of course, Hampshire itself has actually leads the way in terms of recycling amongst the districts and the boroughs, and this is about partnership working, so it wants all the districts and boroughs to actually improve their recycling rates as well, working with us in partnership. Absolutely agree. I don't know, Stuart, if you want to come first, or just like Sam to comment on some of those points. I will just say on the carbon mitigation, there are powers 27 and 28 in there, which does address some of those issues. And in terms of the ambitious, yet again, the conversation this morning was, until we get the environment bill, we need to know exactly what we are dealing with so we can set that and make sure we do have achievable targets. So I understand why as opposition leader you would make those points, but you also understand we've got to make sure we know exactly what that policy is before we can set those. Otherwise, we would be setting unachievable targets. But Sam, you might want to comment first. I'm going to let Sam comment first.
Thanks, Chairman. Just very briefly, I think what I'd say is that this document doesn't contain any actual targets. That's quite deliberate. It's a high-level strategic sort of scene-setting document, if you like, in terms of where we plan to go. This will be followed up by a detailed action plan, which will set clear targets for a number of areas that will include recycling, probably also include residual waste reduction as another key measure, as well as potentially some carbon metrics. Whilst we obviously need to wait and see what the government will say, because it's going to be hard to set targets unless you know what you're setting those targets against, I think we can be clear that we'll certainly set ambitious targets. That's certainly the aim. That came through clearly in both the officer and member discussions as part of the session in developing this strategic document, and that will sort of follow in due course as we get more clarity on other areas.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. I don't know if Stuart, if you want to comment in terms of the Hampshire recycling rate, especially on the points that you made at this morning's select committee.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be brief. But I think it's important to understand that Hampshire County Council isn't actually responsible statutorily for recycling. We work in partnership with the district councils, and whereby we provide the infrastructure to support their recycling efforts, and we work on this stuff collectively. And it is perfectly true that a number of the Hampshire districts are among the poorest performing in terms of recycling rates nationally, and it's for that reason that the average, which Councillor Todd's quoting for the Hampshire area, is among the lowest in the country. But that performance is not the performance of Hampshire County Council. We can't really compare ourselves directly with the districts because we don't run the curbside collection service. But the HWRCs are consistently the highest performing part of the recycling network across Hampshire. And yes, I agree, we need to work together and raise that level of ambition, but it's not something the County Council can do on its own. It absolutely needs the collection authorities to sign up to a significant improvement and to close what is quite a big gap between the best performing and the worst performing districts in Hampshire.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Martin, I'll let you come back quickly on that.
Very quick point, a small factual correction. If you look at the recycling rate reported by central government, Liberal Democrat Hart is on 41.7 and Hampshire is on 41.6. So you're not actually the highest recycling rate of any authority in Hampshire. And the latest figures I've seen for Winchester are around 45. But anyway, that's a different point. I suppose the point is, the core point I come back to, and I'm glad that it's been touched on in passing, but I do think that that discussion about ambition needs to start happening, and Hampshire needs to take a leading role in that, because I don't think it's happening enough, and I will do what I can from my position to try and make it happen. But I do think that as a leading authority, you know, the largest authority involved in the entire discussion, Hampshire needs to draw a line in the sand and express a view of where you want to get to, and then we'll all start having that discussion as to how we get there.
Okay, thanks very much. Katie, is Councillor Taylor there?
No, Councillor Taylor's not here.
Okay, I know she wanted to speak. Okay, so I'll just invite Councillor Stephen Philpott, if he'd like to comment on his select committee this morning. Stephen, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I think that you, the officers, and Councillor Todd have largely summed up the feelings of the Select Committee. There was a feeling amongst one or two members that the strategy lacked clearer targets, but I think that issue has probably been addressed both by yourself and by officers at the Select Committee this morning. I think there was a general acceptance that the strategy is ambitious, it shows commitment, and it's in working in partnership. And it was also accepted that this is a high-level strategy. So that's really more or less what came out of the discussion and debate this morning. But I'm happy to come back if you want any more information.
That's great. Thanks, Councillor Philpott, and for having a very good discussion at your Select Committee meeting this morning. Much appreciated. Sam, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that? Otherwise, I'm very happy with the paper as set out. Just an opportunity, Sam, for you to come back on any of those points.
Just one very minor point, Chairman, if I may. I think Councillor Todd may be reading the data slightly right. The 41% that is quoted for Hampshire includes, that's an aggregated of the HWRCs and the collection authority performance. If you strip out the collection authority performance, the HWRCs are well above 60% recycling rate and a diversion close to 90%. So from landfill, there. I just wanted to make sort of clarify the figures there in terms so everyone's clear. So that 41% for the county, that's the aggregated of when you add the district performance, curbside performance in with the HWRCs. The HWRCs standing alone, as Stuart has said, are well above 60% in terms of their recycling rate.
Okay, thank you very much for that and clarifying that data, and I'm sure Councillor Todd has taken that on board. I have nothing further to add, so thanks, Sam. And all to the team for putting that paper together, much appreciated. So Katie, I'm very happy to accept the recommendations in paragraphs 2 to 3 as set out on page 5. Thank you very much. Okay, we now go to agenda item 2, which is the project appraisal of the A35 Redbridge Causeway, package 3. And I think Brian is presenting.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman. Yeah.
Good afternoon. That's it, we can see you now. Great, thank you.
Good. Yes, my paper relates to Redbridge Causeway carrying the A35 between Totton and Southampton. We started work there in 2018, working on the southbound structure, which is the Redbridge Viaduct. And this paper relates to the eastbound carriageway, which carries traffic into Southampton and up onto the M271. This side carries 3 bridges. The southbound with a single bridge. This is 3 with an embankment in between. One is over water, one is over water and rail, and the other one is over Test Lane and Redbridge Road, just at the eastern end. We've been working on this for quite a few years. Milestone are currently doing the work out there on work package 2. That will be coming to an end towards the end of this year, so towards the November, December time. And we would like to move straight on to work package 3. The funding from work package 3 has come from a successful bid to the DFT. We found out about that in February this year. And 13.4 million has been put forward from DFT for that. Contribution from Hampshire is 2.4 million, and that comes from our structural maintenance budget. Of the money from DFT, 2 million of that is being set aside for some cycle enhancements, and that will be coming from to you from another team in ETE. Once that's ready, that'll be a separate PA. So mine is just relating to the bridge works themselves. The eastbound has slightly different challenges than the other side. We've got to deal with major gas main and water main, which are underneath the structures. We're still over tidal water. And the big difference with this one is we've got the railway to deal with. So we've got railway possessions on this one as well. Like I say, Milestone have been involved right from the beginning and have done early contractor involvement with us. We've arrived at a very good situation with work package 2. There's no reason not to carry on with them. And we're also keeping the same site team, and we'll carry on with that. Obviously, because we've been out there since 2018, we've got all the contacts with stakeholders. We're dealing with Environment Agency, Marine Management Organisation, Network Rail, Highways England, Southampton, and numerous others. So we've got all those contacts, and that will continue. Our comms will continue the same as well. And as far as the programme goes, like I say, we want to start straight after work package 2 so that we can utilise the existing site compound, which would save demobilising and then setting up again. And we're expecting it to take approximately 18 months. Most of that will be underneath the structures, as was the case with work package 2, but we do have to go on top to sort out some surfacing and re-waterproofing. And that is about it, really, to be honest.
Right, thank you very much. And yes, thank you to you and your team again. So I've been down to visit the site several times, and it is a very impressive piece of work. Not at least because the environment, the very sensitive environmental sort of location that it is, and there's been an enormous amount of work to address all that. I think we're close now to 25 million pound that's been spent on the bridge.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, there again, well done to the team for being successful in the bid for the 13.4 million. And it is, you know, an impressive piece of work and a vital bit of infrastructure that I think a lot of people don't realise that the county get involved with that as well, and the impact that it has on the whole of Hampshire effectively there. So well done to you and the team. Pleased to see that going on. I don't know, Tim, if you want to make a quick comment in terms of the team working down there.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points, if I may, Rob. I mean, I would just like to sort of emphasise how well work package 2 has gone, in that it's going to finish ahead of programme and within budget, and that is that, you know, one of the main reasons why we want Milestone to continue with work package 3 and potentially work package 4, depending on the timing. And just for the record, the total spend on the structures, including work package 3, is just under 26 million. If you factor in the walking and cycling work as well, it's just under 28 million. So it's you know, it's an enormous project, and it's gone incredibly well so far. And given that the strength of the collaboration that we've got with Milestone, there is nothing to suggest that work package 3 and 4 won't go the same way.
That's great, Tim, and thanks for that, and very useful. And please pass on our thanks to the Milestones team as well, because, as I say, I've been down there quite a few times, and it really is an impressive piece of work. So thank you for that. I have nothing further to add. I don't think I have anybody wanting to speak on that. So I'm, Katie, very happy to accept the recommendations in paras 2 to 4 as set out on page 41. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item 3, which is the M27 Junction 10 Wellbourne. And I think we have Heather Walmsley presenting this. Heather?
Yes.
That's great. Thank you. Would you just like a brief presentation of the paper? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a project appraisal for the M27 Junction 10, a design and build contract. Further to the Cabinet report on the 13th of July earlier this year, Hampshire conditionally agreed to become the delivery body Junction 10. This was conditional upon 2 conditions. subject to funding confirmation and subject to an MOU with Highways England. In relation to the funding, the Section 106 agreement is nearing completion for 40 million contribution plus a 10 million contingency from the developers. That's imminent, expected within the next week or two. And a grant determination agreement with Homes England for 41.25 million is currently going through legal iterative review. There are a few issues with the grant agreement, in particular, whether we can claim for overheads on staff rates. And in relation to this issue, we're suggesting that an additional recommendation be added to the report, which I can sort of read out, or we can come back to. Is it best to read it?
Yeah, if you finish the report, and I'll come to that at the end, and I'll probably ask Stuart Jarvis to explain that process as well, if that's okay. Thank you, Heather.
Okay, thank you. So it's a lengthy agreement, and that's going through review at the moment. In relation to a memorandum of understanding with Highways England, that's also practically complete. It will be consumed into a more formally binding Section 6 and Section 8 agreement, which will set out the context for working with Highways England throughout the design and delivery of the scheme. On the assumption that the conditions are satisfied, this project appraisal seeks approval to commence the procurement process to enable the completion of the design and the delivery. We need to ensure that the contractor will complete the design, because the complicated structure needs to be designed in a particular way, commensurate with how it's going to be constructed. Prior to committing to deliver the scheme, there will be a gateway review point at which the risks to Hampshire, financial and otherwise, can be fully evaluated to inform the way forward. We're unable to complete the design for the scheme and move forward without procuring the contractor. So consequently, it's quite critical that we get this procurement process underway as soon as possible. Chris Peake's also on the call, Chairman, and he will provide a summary of the approach in that regard.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Thanks very much. I'll ask Chris to do that first, then I'll come to Stuart, if that's okay, Stuart, afterwards, when we've had a little chat, and then about the recommendation. So, Chris, are you there?
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
If I've appeared. Yes, as Heather says, that the critical part of this, it's quite a complex engineering project, creating an underpass under a live motorway, and that is the critical part of the job from a risk management point of view. And because there are specialist skills required, the best way of procuring that is via a design and build two-stage contract. So we're asking for approval to go ahead with a single award, but a two-stage contract, the first being the design phase and securing approvals from Highways England. Obviously, the work will be on the strategic road network, so they have to approve all of the detail of what we want to do. And the second, once the target cost is fully developed and known, then we have the gateway where we can, if there's any problems, we have the option not to proceed, but all being well, we will then proceed with the actual work section of the contract. We plan to use fairly industry standard approach in NEC contract, NEC 4 engineering construction contract, so it's well understood by the market. We are proposing to use our Gen 4.3 framework, which was designed with schemes like this in mind. So it is a framework with 4 international national tier 1 contractors on, who all have the technical expertise, financial standing to manage a job like this, and also have all experience working with Highways England, or National Highways as they are as of this week, I believe. So we want to proceed with that and start talking to the panel as soon as possible, so that we can finalise the details of the I won't go into any more details than is required.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for that. And before I ask Stuart to speak, I just want to say, in terms of so that everybody on the call is aware, this has been an enormous amount of work over many years. I just want to say a massive thank you to Heather, because I know she's lived and breathed this project for a long time, and it's through the skills of her and Keith Wilcox and yourself, Chris, that we've got to this stage, and indeed the expertise and the skills that Stuart has brought to this to get this. We've supported this project all the way along. It has been a mammoth task to get to here, but we had certain red lines to protect the council taxpayers of Hampshire, and by doing that, the contributions, I think, have nearly doubled over that period, because we needed to make sure that the residents and the taxpayers of Hampshire were safe about any situation that could arise. I think, Stuart, I'm right in saying this is probably the biggest single project that, in terms of that, we will be undertaking, so it's massive. But I would like, Stuart, to make if you could make a few comments, and then explain in terms of the recommendations and the additional recommendation we are potentially proposing today, Stuart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And yes, I absolutely agree. This is probably the biggest thing that we've taken on. And as Chris said, in engineering terms, it's probably the most complex as well. And it's really important that the County Council, I think, is steadfast in protecting the council taxpayers' interest in this scheme, from which the County Council does not directly financially benefit the scheme. It's about bringing about and enabling a mixed housing and employment development, which would be very important to the future economy and prosperity of the sub-region. But the County Council stepped in here at the request of the previous Secretary of State for Transport to actually help bring forward this design, and now with a view to taking on the kind of oversight of the construction, finishing the design and the statutory procedures and construction of the motorway. And it's relatively unusual for a county council to build a motorway junction, which is part of the strategic road network, the national network. In that context, Chairman, as you rightly said, and as Heather pointed out, it's very important that we safeguard the County Council's interest and are very clear and careful about the way in which the project is both funded and any liabilities are dealt with throughout the contract. And Chris and his team are very diligent in that regard. With regards to the extra recommendation, Chairman, I think it's simply to try to make it absolutely clear that the County Council's position is the same as it's always been, that no Hampshire resources should go into this motorway junction construction. This is being funded by a combination of developer funding and central government grant aid, which is designed to accelerate the provision of the infrastructure. There has been some interesting discussion over the last few days with officials from Homes England about what exactly is eligible for capital grant funding and what may not be. We hope that those interesting discussions will be resolved reasonably quickly and favourably to allow the scheme to go ahead on the basis that we all envisage. But to make the County Council's position crystal clear, an extra recommendation is proposed which covers our ability to fully recover our costs. And with your permission, Chairman, I'll read the recommendation out so that anyone listening to the meeting is aware of what that is.
Yes, please. Thanks, Chair.
So the recommendation is that the commencement of any further capital funded works shall be subject to funding agreements ensuring full cost recovery for the County Council and to be finalised before any expenditure is incurred. So in other words, we can carry on doing the work we're doing at the moment, which is funded by a revenue grant, but we won't embark on incurring any capital expenditure until we resolve the issue that we're able to cover by external funding sources the full cost of the County Council's contribution in terms of staff time and other work to the development of the project.
Stuart, thank you very much, and that was a very clear explanation. So just to be clear, we're very supportive of this and supportive of the paper, but all that does, but we are actually reliant on other decisions being taken. So this extra recommendation, yet again, sort of looks at protection of the county council and more importantly, the residents of Hampshire from a taxpayer's point of view, that we are secured and covered from that point of view. I'm just going to ask my colleagues, Councillor Oppenheimer and Councillor Warwick, just to see that they are very happy with that recommendation and the reasons behind it. So I'll go to Councillor Warwick first.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy with that sensible recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Russell?
Yeah, I'm also happy and supportive.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Stuart, it's just a sort of, yet again, if I may, thank you and the team for getting it to this stage. As I said, it's been an enormous amount of work, huge amounts of negotiations and discussions have gone on. So big thanks to you and the team. And I'm very, very happy to accept that additional recommendation. I don't know how, I just want to check in with Susie, sort of how we do that, and with Katie, that's okay. Susie, just like to comment, please.
Certainly, Councillor Humby. I think what needs to happen is that Katie will reflect that in the decision record that comes forward, acknowledging your acceptance of the additional recommendations should you agree to approve the recommendations as drawn.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. I'll just go to Councillor Philpott to make sure as a Select Committee Chairman that he understands that process and that's what will happen. Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I had the advantage of being able to speak to officers on a previous occasion about this, okay. and I've read the report, and I have no further comments or questions. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much for that. Very much appreciate that. So then, Katie, accepting the recommendations that were set out in Paris 2 to 5 on page 51 and 52, plus the extra recommendation that Stuart Jarvis has just read out, that will clearly be noted in the report. So I'm very happy to accept those recommendations and the additional one as Stuart Jarvis has set out. I don't know if anybody's got anything else to add. Stuart, do you want to add a little bit to that, or are you content with that? Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much and appreciate your patience with that. Okay, we're now going to go on to agenda item 4, which is the saving programme 2023 proposals. And I think, Stuart, you are presenting this. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. This sets out the savings proposals as part of the SP23 programme, and the purpose of the report today is to seek your authority to recommend those on to Cabinet for consideration before ultimately the Cabinet recommendations go to full council for a final decision. Yeah. Chairman, the department has a target to achieve of £10.26 million. We discussed this extensively this morning at the Select Committee, and I made a presentation there which went through all the proposals, and I know that you and other executive members are very familiar with the proposals, having kind of gone through a number of briefings in the run-up to the decision day today. The significant thing to point out, I think, is that two of the proposals that were included in the public consultation earlier in the year have now been withdrawn or no longer recommended for taking forward, and that relates to the withdrawal of funding for school crossing patrols and the potential for closing a number of HWRC facilities. And because of better than expected performance on waste growth, and in the context of all the things that are happening at the national level around future changes to the waste system, it's recommended that we can make, we will need to make less financial provision for the rate of growth in waste in the future, and that funding can instead be applied to maintaining the school crossing patrol service and maintaining the current estate of HWRCs. I think they're the main changes, Chairman. The only other thing I'd draw attention to is the reduction in the savings target for passenger transport services, which is in part due to the anticipated changes coming forward at national government level around funding and the whole Bus Back Better initiative, and it's partly by increasing the target for the savings that we will achieve through enhanced traffic management measures. That saving is clearly subject to the details as we go forward of how the government enact the Bus Back Better thing. And again, the Select Committee this morning had a very good presentation on that. I know it's a matter of great interest to members. I simply raise it here as being one of the areas where we are very much subject to further national change, and that may have an impact later on on this, either for, hopefully for the better, but we always need to bear in mind that we're not certain of the outcome at this stage.
Stuart, thank you very much. And I'll just remind everybody on the call also that this did go through a very full and thorough scrutiny this morning, thanks to Councillor Philpott. And I'll come to you later, Councillor Philpott, if that's okay to make comment. I think we all agree, there are difficult decisions to be made, but what I'm pleased about is went through the consultation, we've listened to what the public said, and then we have been able to make those changes in terms of school crossing patrols and the HWRCs. Councillor Morritt might want to comment later in terms of the efforts to look at how that's going to be funded through the waste reduction. But first of all, I know that Councillor Todd wants to comment. So Martin, over to you first, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Humby. I think it's important to stress when we look at this paper, these are ultimately cuts of choice. Mr. Jarvis has highlighted how a lot of the decisions that we're facing are consequent on central government choices, and they are choices. In terms of the funding that the council is due to get, there are a range of factors in place which do not lie wholly in our hands, but they are where choices will be made. There will be choices made in the autumn statement in October. There will be choices made in terms of the funding settlement that comes from Bus Back Better. There will be choices made in terms of the funding that comes with the Environment Bill, and there will be choices made in terms of the county deal. And many of those choices lie outside what we're able to influence, although they will be in part be determined by how effectively we jump through the government's hoops in terms of asking them for money. So it is important that we don't treat this as some kind of external act of God and the cuts that we're having to make as something that sort of come out of nowhere. They come out of political choices made in Westminster that the residents of Hampshire will be at the receiving end of. And I think we're all aware as to how heavy the cuts have been. It feels to me that we're now being forced into a position of contradictions. We talk about the ambitions that are possible through the joint municipal waste management strategy and how we can improve recycling, but then effectively we're looking to take money out of recycling. We look at the options for improved bus services and potentially of great interest in terms of Bus Back Better, and then we talk about cutting the funding for buses. So there's a real concern that it doesn't add up. There is also a problem in terms of the process that we're going through at the moment of timing. We don't actually know what the government's financial plans are in terms of the autumn statement, and as was made clear in the meeting this morning, we don't know what their plans are for Bus Back Better or the Environment Bill. And so it feels premature, particularly when the primary source of funding for local government will be decided within a month from now, to be saying, yep, these are definitely the cuts we need to sign up to. Of course, welcome the choice not to proceed with cuts to crossing patrols and to household waste recycling centres, and that choice is welcome and one that has been made locally. But I'm genuinely concerned about the cuts to passenger transport service, both the what community transport subsidies and also the cuts in service. And I suppose also concerned, and I've had concern expressed to me about the cuts to the lengthsman service, albeit one being the kind of thing that does improve the lives of residents in Hampshire, is welcome across the county and is the kind of thing that has been driven out of local government by the choices made by central government. But again, they are political choices and we should not pretend that they are not and some kind of act of God. So from our point of view, we don't support this proposal. We at scrutiny, we're told, well, we either support this or come up with an alternative proposal. We reserve the right to do that later in the process in Cabinet and full council when the funding situation is clearer. We don't support it because we don't believe it's right that local government should continue to be under the cosh in the way that it is. We don't support the political choices that lead to this situation, and therefore while I understand the pressures you're under and the process that you have decided to follow, partly because of the question of timing and partly because we disagree with the political choices sitting behind it, we do not support the paper in front of you today.
Okay, Martin, thank you for your comments. I don't know, Stuart, if you want to come back, otherwise I'll go straight to Councillor Philpott. No, Councillor Philpott.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think there's only 3 points I will make very briefly from what came out of the Select Committee meeting this morning. There was an acceptance from members, and they welcomed the consultation process, and the fact that the consultation process determined not to proceed or carry forward the ideas that were in the consultation document, the balancing the budget for the closure of HWRCs and removal of school crossing patrols. So members were very pleased with that. Also, there was an acceptance, of course, that from members that this matter will be considered anyway further by Cabinet. And the third thing, which hasn't been mentioned yet in your meeting, but came up this morning from a couple of members, was the issue of the money that the County Council pay to the Lengthman project. There is a little bit of concern, and one of the questions that perhaps you might want to consider when you're making your determinations is and it arose from 2 members, was the implications, potential implications for withdrawing the funding for the Lengthman service. So those really are the only 3 things that I think I would like to highlight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, and appreciate those comments. And I say we did address some of those issues on the parish Lengthman scheme. I made it quite clear that I'm a big supporter there, but you know that we have to set a balanced budget, and I'm very keen and had discussions with Stuart on how we can assist and help those parish councils to continue with that. It's one of those things a lot of the parish councils already do. I have a local one that's sort of a hub to that, they support it, and some of the smaller parish councils buy into that as well and those services. And of course, the cultural communities and business services through the countryside services do support it as well. So I'm sure there's further discussions to be had with how we might could address some of those. But it is one of those things, as everybody's saying, it's a very valued service. And I think some of those parish councils we can work with to see how they can and what they can do to contribute to support that going forward as well. So thank you for that. Stuart, did you want to come back on any points?
Chairman, just a procedural one to say that, of course, the decisions on the SP23 proposals will be made at full council rather than at any meeting before, and that will be several days after the autumn statement date, albeit that I accept that the papers for full council will probably be out before the autumn statement.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. I'm just going to ask my 2 colleagues, whether Councillor Warwick or Councillor Oppenheimer would just like to make a statement. Russell?
Well, I mean, seeing as we've heard some political comments from the opposition spokesman, I'll just say, as far as I'm aware, it's not Lib Dem policy at a national level to take money away from the NHS or from schools and reallocate it to local government. So until it is, I take everything he says with a pinch of salt.
Thank you, Russell. Councillor Warwick?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's a very positive thing that Stuart's managed to do, in that he's allied waste prevention with the support of the Household Waste Recycling Centre. So that is a really important message for our residents and a key message to go out from this meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Warwick, and that was a point I was hoping you would make in terms of, being able to retain the Household Waste Recycling Centre, but also drive up, sort of if you like, the reduction in the waste, to sort of how we make those savings. So that, it's a double gain from that point of view, I suppose you could argue from that. But of course, it has to be achieved, and we need to remember that as well. So, Stuart, do you want to add anything quickly, Stuart, now? No, okay. But it's just to thank you and the team. It has been tough. It's tough decisions. I'm pleased we went through the consultation. We were able to listen to that and make those adjustments to that and amendments to that as well. And as you said, the final decision will go through to full council as well. So thanks to Stuart and Sue and the team as well, who has worked very hard on getting us to a point where we're able to take forward, from ETE's point of view, our part of that share in the savings under those collective responsibilities to going forward as well. So thank you very much. So Katie, very happy to accept the recommendations as set out in para 2 on page 79. Katie, thank you very much. Okay, we'll now proceed to agenda item 5, Reciting Infrastructure Planning Application. I think that's Sam again. Sam, hi.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, so this paper kind of follows on from the earlier paper related to the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy. This is effectively the next stage in delivering on the aims of the Environment Bill. So this would be an application seeking approval to submit an application for a new materials recovery facility to be located at a site just off Chickenhall Lane in Eastleigh. The report has a couple of maps to show the site that's contained. It's a site on an industrial estate adjacent to the sewage treatment works and just at the end of the Southampton Airport. The site, the report sort of outlines a brief description of the facility that we'll be looking to develop, which is a large MRF container, a container MRF building capable of handling. In the report, it says 65,000 tonnes of waste with a 20,000 tonne waste transfer station. I just need to be clear that did not include, apologies, that did not include the fibre processing facility, because the twin stream system relies on collecting containers in one mix and the fibre separately. And apologies, we omitted the 20,000 tonnes of fibre that will be processed at this facility. It'll effectively come in and be sorted and then baled to go straight out. So the total capacity of the site, whereas the report states around 85,000 tonnes, it's likely to be closer to 100,000 tonnes. Apologies for not including that in the original draft. But yeah, so this is seeking approval to submit the planning application to understand what are some of the, if there are any challenges or issues related to the site, particularly around landscaping, development, ecology, and of course transport, which always remains a challenge with some of these facilities to get the material in and out. The aim of the planning application would be to drive out what those issues are so that we can address them and look to take the project forward. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Sam, thank you very much. I'll come to Councillor Warwick, who might want to comment on this in a second. But so in terms of that additional tonnage, that has no impact in terms of the application that was there. It's purely for this report. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Apologies. It's an oversight on my part, Chairman. It should have been in the total there. Should have been an additional 20,000 tonnes of fibre processing identified.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Warwick, would like a brief comment on this?
No, I've waited many years to see this, so I'm really pleased, and I know how important the carbon footprint is tied up with this twin stream processing. So thank you for highlighting that and bringing this paper forward. I'm really pleased. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Councillor Philpott, would you like a brief comment, or you?
That's very kind of you, Chairman. I think under the circumstances, as a member of the Regulatory Committee on the Hampshire County Council, it would be inappropriate for me to make any comment. Thank you.
Quite right to point out, and apologies for including you. I'll make sure that doesn't happen again, Councillor Philpott. Sam, thank you very much. Appreciate that application. So clearly very pleased to see this coming forward and very pleased to support. So Katie, happy to support the recommendations in para 2 on page 175, I believe. Thank you very much. Okay, so agenda item 6. This is the council term contract for installation and maintenance of traffic signals and associated equipment, variation of contract. I think Adrian Gray is presenting. Hi, Adrian.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the purpose of the report is to seek approval for a variation to the term contract for the supply, installation and maintenance of traffic signals and associated equipment, estimated to be £5 million. The reason for this is expenditure through the contract is now forecast to exceed the original approval level back in November 2015, which was £12 million at that time. Currently, the forecast spend is expected to be 13.7 million by the end of June 23 and 15.6 million by the end of June 2024. Approvals therefore sought for a variation to the contract spend of £5 million to cover this, and also to allow for any potential additional schemes during this time if required. And that's all I'll say, if that's okay. Thank you.
Adrian, that's great. Thanks very much. I don't have anybody to speak on this. I think it's a variation of contract, perfectly understandable why and the reasons for doing it. So I don't think there's any further comments. So thank you for presenting and fully understand. So Katie, very happy to accept the recommendations as set out in para 2 on page 183. Okay, thank you. So my last agenda item before I hand over to Councillor Oppenheimer is the appointment to outside bodies, and there's only one change. It's on pages 189 to 190. Propose that Councillor Andy Tree replace Councillor Debbie Cunroe-Ford on the Whitehill and Borden Town Partnership Committee, and very happy to accept the changes that we're making there, Katie, on page 189 of the pack. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my part of this session of D-Day. I will now be handing over the chairmanship to Councillor Russell Oppenheimer to take us through his D-Day papers. Councillor Oppenheimer, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Executive Member for Highways Operations, and I would like to remind you that this virtual decision day continues to be webcast on YouTube and via the County Council website. And before we turn to item 8, I'm just going to invite Stuart Jarvis to say a few words about the change in the agenda we had yesterday, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I made the decision yesterday, apologies for the belated nature of it, to withdraw the report on parking agency agreements, which was due to be considered by you today. And the reason for that was that I received correspondence, including 2 letters yesterday from chief executives of the borough and district councils affected, which I felt raised some issues which we did need to discuss further. There was clearly some misunderstandings and some misapprehensions, but there was also some points raised which I thought did merit clarification and further discussion. And I thought the proper course of action, Chairman, was to withdraw the paper at this stage and allow that discussion to take place before we come back with a report later in the calendar year for consideration, but taking full account of in that paper of the discussion with our district council colleagues. I was also mindful that there's rapid progress currently happening at a national level with the rollout of so-called Part 6 powers under the Traffic Management Act, which will allow local authorities or highway authorities outside London to actually take over civil enforcement of a range of moving traffic offences, and that is related to the parking agency arrangement, and it therefore also felt prudent that we catch up with the most recent developments on that rapidly moving picture. And for that reason, Chairman, I propose to bring a report back to you covering both of those items later in the year.
Thank you, Stuart. And I supported your decision to withdraw the paper, and I know the executive lead member, Councillor Humby, also supported it. I'll just briefly comment, if I may. For me, this shows the decision day process working well. At Hampshire County Council, we have the confidence and the humility to take decisions in a very transparent way. And I would actually contend that's one of the reasons we're such a strong council, certainly one of the top 3 county councils in the country. And there are 2 key messages, I think, for anyone who may be watching this on YouTube. Firstly, we are always in listening mode and will reflect very carefully on points that are made to us. And secondly, we will always be prepared to take the time to get decisions right. That's what's most important to us. And I think we've seen that in the decision to withdraw this paper, spend some more time talking to our stakeholders. So without further ado, I will move on now to my first agenda item, which is item 8, the project appraisal on Whitchurch accessibility and traffic measures. And I think we've got Jacob Stasinski is here.
That's correct. Hi. Hello, everybody.
Thanks. Over to you.
So I'm here to present the Whitchurch project and to seek for approval to procure and spend and enter into contractual arrangements. And the project is called Whitchurch Accessibility and Traffic Measures, and the estimated cost is £749,000, and it's to be funded from developer contributions mainly, and a little bit from Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council contributions. The main background or the reasons for the projects are to improve pedestrian and cycle accessibility to offset the impacts of future developments, for instance, such as south of Bloodwood Lane and Caesars Way, and as well as to address the transport priorities set out by Whitchurch Town Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, and also to provide safer walking routes for school children and encourage them to travel more sustainably, which supports the collective aspirations of Hampshire County Council. So, in a nutshell, we've been talking to Whitchurch Town Council for a few years now, and as a result of various meetings, we have come together with a list of locations that need addressing. At the moment, it's 12 locations, and the works vary from anything like shared use cycle paths to build outs and uncontrolled pedestrian crossing, footway upgrades, dropped curbs, that sort of thing, across all 12 locations. And yeah, the main driver is effectively to make walking and cycling easier for the residents of Whitchurch. And hopefully we'd like to be on site possibly January 2022, with a duration of about 7 months at the moment. That's the estimated figures or deadlines, and that's kind of it in a nutshell in terms of the scheme.
Thank you. That's really helpful, very clear, Jacob. I haven't got anyone down to speak, so if anyone does want to comment, please raise your hand. And whilst I'm waiting for anyone to do that, I'll just say how pleased I was to see this package of measures. Anything that improves walking and cycling is always going to be getting a tick from me, and an enthusiastic thumbs up, in fact. And I also think it's a good template for other towns who may want to do similar measures with their developer funding. So Martin Todd, over to you to make a comment. You've put your hand up.
Yes, break the habit of a lifetime and say nice things about something. But no, this does look like a very well thought through and considered project. I know I know from talking to colleagues in Whitchurch that it's seen as being good partnership working by the county council with the local town council and district council. And so I think all strength to the officers who've done the work. And let's hope it's a model for much more of this kind of activity in all our other towns and villages across the county.
Thank you very much for that comment. And I'm pleased that we're in great harmony over this item. So turning to the recommendations in paragraphs 2 to 4, Katie, I'm very happy to accept those recommendations, please. Moving on to agenda item 9. The future partnership arrangement for minibus driver assessment and training scheme, MIDAS. And I'd like to invite Kevin Ning to introduce this item, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. This report seeks approval from the Council to enter into a partnership with 2 other organisations to continue the future development and operation of MIDAS. MIDAS is a Hampshire product. It was introduced in 1995. And there are now plans to refresh and modify the scheme to make sure that it continues to meet market needs and makes the best use of the latest practices and technology. So the report sets out plans to undertake this work in partnership with 2 other organisations, the Community Transport Association, which is a national organisation which represents the community transport sector and which the council has a long-standing working relationship with, and a third organisation, an organisation called Mobility, which very much sees MIDAS as an organisation which can benefit the specific needs of disabled people. So we feel that this proposed arrangement will enable MIDAS to continue to make a key contribution locally and nationally to improving driving standards and minibus passenger safety. And so therefore there are a number of recommendations, one to enter into the agreement, but also the report sets out a number of principles on which the agreement should be negotiated. And so therefore it seeks delegated authority to the director to negotiate and finalise the agreement based on those principles, and also to manage the scheme during its duration.
Thank you, Kevin. I think we can all be very proud of our involvement in this scheme, and we've done something of great significance that's made a contribution nationally. And I'd like to just invite Martin Todd, who has put his hand up, to make a comment, and then I'll say one other thing.
Yes, I'd like to say a couple of things. One is, it's an interesting, although you may not realise it, example of cross-party working, since this scheme was originally put in place when the Liberal Democrats ran the council. And indeed, Councillor Collett, who is still on the County Council, was the councillor representative at the launch at Millbank Tower in London when it was first introduced. But I would like to pay credit to both the officers and actually all the councillors involved over the years for continuing to build on it. And to me, it is a great example of what local government is able to do, not just to make life better for people in Hampshire, but across the country, if it's not under the financial cosh in the way that it has been for the last few years. You know, it's a kind of example of the sort of innovation that I've seen repeatedly from council officers when they're given the space to innovate and the space to make improvements for the benefit of the public. I think too often people have don't understand the full commitment and creativity and skill and empathy that council officers can bring in terms of how the council can deliver for our community. And it's very nice to see something like this survive and thrive because of those qualities over the year and get national recognition. So for obvious reasons, very, very supportive of this, particularly like the fact that having a good system of national minibus driver assessment, which we seem currently unable to do for HGV drivers, also enables, you know, reduced carbon through making shared journeys easier, for example. So it's something I think as a county we should be very proud of, and particularly to the officers and councillors who've driven and nurtured it over the years.
Thank you, Martin. And it's a good point about the carbon savings. I didn't know that Adrian Collett was involved in this scheme. So, you know, thank you for sharing that information with me. I think all of us as councillors can take a sliver of credit for this scheme because the driving force behind it has been Kevin. And Kevin, I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to you. I know you're retiring soon, and we really owe you a huge debt of gratitude. We promise that we will shepherd this scheme and keep it going and nurture it and improve it wherever we can. You can be very proud of your contribution, and we wish you well in your retirement. Rob, I think you would like to comment.
Yeah, just to sort of more or less repeat what you were going to say, actually. So we're in amongst community transport royalty with Kevin, actually. I'd just like to say he's done a tremendous job over many years, and he's been recognised nationally within his organisation, within the trade press as well. So huge congratulations to you, Kevin. Complete utter respect for you. And I know that has been right across the country as well with your colleagues. So well done.
Indeed. Well done, Kevin. And thanks. And I hope, you know, we'll have a party where we can share a drink with you at some point when, you know, when we're able to do that. So thanks very much. That ends item 9, and my final item is item 10. Oh, it's also Kevin. It's the concessionary fares and contract payments for bus and community transport operators. So back to you.
Councillor Oppenheimer, just before you pass over, I'm not sure that you formally approved the recommendations unless I missed something on that item. So could I just ask you to do that, please?
Thank you, Susie. I got carried away with the emotions there. Right, I would like to, before we leave item 9, I'd like to go back to paragraphs 4 to 6 and note that I am very happy to approve the recommendations there. For the record, please. Thanks. So yes, item 10, and Kevin, would you like to introduce this item?
Given that Kevin's on mute, Chairman, I'll take. No, I'll
Okay.
take. I was going to take this item, Councillor Oppenheimer.
Okay.
Although it's got Kevin's name on it, I'll take us through this one if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay. So this report deals with the payment arrangements that we make to our local bus, taxi share and community transport operators as we're recovering from the pandemic. It follows on from very similar reports that we've brought to the exec member, first of all in November 2020 and then earlier this year in March. And it sets out our continued approach to supporting our transport operators up until the end of this financial year. The current arrangements that are in place for payments, the policy in effect that was approved in March that expires at the end of this month, hence the need for this report to take us through to the end of the current financial year. So this is pretty much very similar to the previous report. We continue to work closely with the DfT, follow their guidance on helping the sector recover, doing what we can to ensure that our transport operators continue to be viable into the future. I suppose the main flavour of the report is that we continue the support for all our operators, but we're recommending now that as passenger numbers are increasing a little bit, that we move towards a business as usual approach for some aspects. Social distancing requirements have been removed from public transport now, passenger numbers are increasing. So in terms of local bus contracts and taxi shares, we're proposing that we make a slight change there. We actually pay them in terms of the contracted amounts. We pay them for what they operate rather than the whole contract cost that we've been advised to pay previously. In reality, the bus operators are running virtually 100% service anyway, so it doesn't mean a loss of income for them. There are no budget implications with this report. Everything proposed is fundable within existing budgets, either within the local bus and taxi share contract budget or the concessionary fares budget. But it is important that we continue to support the sector as we move out of the pandemic and ensure that we've got a healthy and viable sector for the future, so we get good competition for our tenders, and that we're in a place where we can make the most of any money that comes in through the National Bus Strategy. So in terms of summarising the recommendations, the concessionary fares reimbursement to local bus operators remains as is. So we continue to pay on the basis of the percentage of the pre-COVID network that they operate. For the community transport sector, we continue to pay 100% contract payments and 100% concessionary fares. That's because they've had less financial protection from the government or by the government, provided by the government. They haven't had the same levels of funding as the local bus operators have seen. And then the one I just talked about was the amending the policy around local bus and taxi share contract payments to move that back to business as usual. And then the final two recommendations deal with delegating authority to the director together with the exec member to make adjustments to the payment mechanisms should DfT guidance change in the future, as long as we remain within our allocated budgets.
Thank you, Andrew. Any comments here from Martin Todd or Stephen Philpotts?
I think it looks like a sensible and thought through proposal. I mean, I think there is a discussion that we need to have, possibly jointly with the districts in places, as to how we help get people back onto buses. Certainly, I know, Christmas is potentially a good opportunity because particularly where we're likely to have a lot of traffic. But this system of subsidy seems appropriate and a sensible, proportionate response to the current situation.
Yeah, I agree. I discussed it at length during our pre-briefing with Andrew, and we've got the funds available. We want to support the operators to continue these routes, and it's part of the green recovery. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations at paragraphs 6 to 10. And I'd ask Katie to minute that, please. Thank you very much. That concludes my decisions. And I'd like to hand back now to the Executive Lead Member, Rob Humby, please. You're on mute, Rob.
I did it just to check that you noticed, Russell. That was all like that. Thank you very much, Russell, for concluding your part of this session within your D-Day. We'll now hand over to Councillor Jan Warwick to take us through her D-Day within this session. Councillor Warwick.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Humby and Councillor Oppenheimer, and good afternoon. I'm the Executive Member for Climate Change and Sustainability, and thank you for attending my virtual decision day today. This decision day continues to be webcast on YouTube via the County Council website. We have no deputations for the papers that I'm about to decide upon. So moving to agenda item 11 is the Climate Change Annual Report 2020-2021, and this can be found on pages 257 to 266. This is a summary report ahead of presentation of the full report to Cabinet on the 12th of October, ahead of COP26 and ahead of 2022, our Year of Resilience. I'd like to hand over to Chitra, who will be presenting this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. So as Councillor Warwick said, this paper is the summary of an annual report that will be going to Cabinet on the 12th of October. This covers the year of activity that's taken place since the strategy was approved by Cabinet in July 2020. So the annual report will cover an update on what we've been doing to embed climate change across the whole of the County Council, for example, things like e-learnings and procurement guidance. The bulk of the report will focus on the key programmes that have been taking place within the strategic framework, and this is again, this is where most of the work is being focused on areas like residential, transport, energy, etc. There's also a brief update on networks and partnerships, communications and marketing, which is quite a key area for us in terms of the climate change engagement side with our residents. There will also be a progress update on the implementation of the action plan. So these are the 200 actions that are taking place across the whole of the County Council to embed climate change in everything that we do. We also have a number of appendices. The first appendix to the annual report will be a set of infographics. This is a sort of easy to view summaries of the notable progress areas in the kind of key sectors of transport, highways, environment, residential, energy, and engaging with residents. The other appendices will be the annual report itself, the progress on the strategic framework. So this is where we'll give the detailed updates against each of the programs, and also the detailed updates in Appendix 4 on every single one of those 200 actions. The next part of the report just gives a summary of where we are with the budget in terms of the climate change budget. And then it goes into performance and COVID. So really just to showcase that there's been a lot of progress over the last year, significant progress have taken place across the key areas. And although COVID has given us some disruptions, it's also had some positive impacts in that it's accelerated some areas as well. And as Councillor Warwick alluded to, we have decided to focus our second year on resilience. And this is partly because it is one of our 2 targets. We want to give it as much prominence as the carbon emissions, but also because it's in a national government have highlighted that this is not something that's been, a lot of action has been taken on. So it's a good opportunity for us to showcase the fact that we do have 2 targets and that we will be focusing a bit more on resilience next year. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chitra. Councillor Todd, I have you down to speak against this item. I don't know if you have any questions you wish to raise.
I suppose my question, it's quite a hard paper to respond to because effectively it's a paper telling us what's going to be in another paper. And you know, I have obviously had conversations about a lot of the work that the county is doing, and I suppose, and there is some progress in terms of embedding it, and I think some of the work that's been governance is very impressive and stuff that needs to be reapplied, but it is taking time to be embedded, and not at this decision day, which actually it's something I would have mentioned earlier. A lot of the papers are talking more about carbon than they did before. I remember saying at the previous decision day that I actually felt that when you sat through the entire day, listened to all the papers, all the carbon sections basically said, well, this is the bit where the amount of carbon used goes, and this is where how we deal with the impacts of climate change, but didn't really have anything in there. And the overall impression of the day was, this isn't quite embedded yet. It isn't quite showing through in how people act. And an interesting example that's mentioned in passing is, well, there's an LTP4 carbon calculator coming, which is great as part of movement. It's desperately needed because it's a gap in most of our papers at the moment, whenever we talk about highways measures, that there's not enough in there about carbon. And so I suppose my question would be, this obviously leads a lot of questions unanswered. I think it's a shame that effectively it goes straight to Cabinet and doesn't get more detailed engagement and scrutiny from councillors and officers throughout the rest of the organisation. I think my hope would be that all committees, frankly, at least once a year, have a proper conversation about carbon and how every area of the council is performing on it, and doesn't leave it as a special thing that occasionally gets reported into Cabinet. So, because, for example, from the ETE point of view, let's say we're having a theme of resilience for next year 2 of the programme. Well, frankly, there's enough, ETE on its own could easily have a long and detailed conversation about that, environment, transport and economy, because those are all areas where we need to be thinking about resilience. So, I can't argue with a paper that says this is what we're going to put in a report. I mean, what's to argue about? But I think I would challenge and ask questions to say, do we need to take a more ambitious approach to mainstreaming? I mean, one of the things I asked for earlier in the meeting is, when we're talking about the vision for recycling, for example, and Project Integra, does carbon reduction and the climate mitigation belong in the overall vision? Is it a top table KPI, not one hidden down away saying, and if we do things properly, we'll reduce carbon, but absolutely one of the things when we're sitting there saying, what do we think of this proposal? Is it doing enough on climate change? So I think my concern with the model that the administration has chosen to use is that I think you've missed the opportunity to more deeply embed and engage the wider council, particularly councillors, but not just councillors, in driving carbon through everything we do, through the way you've chosen to deal with this annual report. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I suppose I'm interested to hear what can be done to make sure that this doesn't become just a conversation with, Cabinet members and whichever shadow Cabinet members and deputies turn up.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Humby, I can see you've got your hand up. Would you, before I go to Chitra, would you like to make comment?
Yeah, just to respond to that in terms of who's been consulted and everything else, of course, this covers the entire council and it concerns everybody. And Chitra and his staff has done a great deal of work in that collective responsibility right across the whole authority. And that is why, of course, it will go to scrutiny and under P&R, where all the select committee chairs will be there. So I think hopefully that will address Councillor Todd's concerns about that. It is absolutely correct that it goes to P&R Select Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Humby. Councillor Philpott, you have something to add here.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo those comments from Councillor Humby, if I may, and say I think that was a little unfair and a little disingenuous, actually, of Councillor Todd to suggest that this is something that's only being discussed amongst Cabinet. I mean, I very much welcomed Chitra's excellent presentation on the 13th of September on the members' briefing, and that was very well attended, I think, across all parties. And I think that's a testament, really, to the seriousness that the council take this matter. I mentioned earlier on at the Select Committee that I didn't necessarily agree entirely with Councillor Todd's view that we weren't embedding this matter into everything that we do. I think that we are, and so I don't necessarily take the same views as Councillor Todd, and I think we're doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Philpott. I mean, one thing, Chitra, you might want to explain is the carbon assessment tool that every department is now using, and maybe it's not obviously obvious in that the final conclusions of that are presented at the end of a report, so it looks like it's an afterthought, but actually you're going to say how very much that's at the start of any process, I think.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Warwick. I think the annual report is a look back, so it's a backwards look. It's not necessarily about what we need to do going forward in terms of continuing to embed climate change in everything we do. One of the areas, obviously, is the decision tools that we've implemented that are now mandatory for everyone that's writing in a report that's public facing or exec member reports, cabinet reports, etc. And we, as the climate change team, will be monitoring how those decision tools are being put to use and making sure that they are being used properly and accurately, and not, people not saying that, it's not relevant to them, and really kind of challenging those decisions. So I think there's, probably two separate things here, where the annual report is very much a look back to see what we've done, what we've achieved. And the next stage for us now is going into year 2, is really amping up sort of all of those areas that we know we need to kind of focus on. And I think the sort of internal engagement is absolutely one of them. We proposed a policy very early on, even before the strategy was approved, that every single policy and strategy would be reviewed in light of climate change. And as you will see in the annual report, that's already starting to happen. But again, we need to push more on that. We need to do more work on our procurement policy. So there's a lot more to be done to really embed this. And, I think because it's such a huge agenda, we have to take it at the right pace. Otherwise, we will lose people along the way. So I understand your concerns, but I hope that, when you do see the annual report, you'll see that there is a lot of progress, but that by no means saying that we're stopping there.
Thank you, Chitra, and by no means complacent. I just want to thank you and your team, because you're a very small but very bespoke team. So you've done a tremendous amount of work. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing the full report in due course. So from this paper then, Katie, I'm happy to accept the recommendations which are laid out in paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 257. Thank you. We're now moving to item 12 on the agenda, which is project appraisal of the A32 Farringdon and Chawton flood alleviation scheme. And this is phase 2 of that scheme, and the details of this scheme are laid out on pages 267 to 280. And we have Paul Prouting, I believe, is going to present this paper. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This report relates to a much needed flood alleviation scheme for Lower Farringdon, Chawton and the A32 highway, in order to make changes and improvements to the drainage network to enable it to convey both surface and groundwater flows similar to the 2014 flood event, which caused significant disruption to both the community and road users, and which you can see in the background behind me is the A32 through Lower Farringdon looking towards the crossroads. These phase 2 works that follow on from phase 1 works that have already been completed will focus on building more resilience into the drainage infrastructure, including additional capacity for the Winterbourne immediately upstream of and through Lower Farringdon Village Centre, as well as further improvements works downstream. Following approval of the business case by the Environment Agency, which secured additional funding of £317,000 by the DEFRA Flood Defence Granting Aid and Thames Regional Flood and Coastal Committee local levy funding, this report sets out the need for phase 2 works. And the report proposes further partnership funding of £69,000 met from the County Council's Flood Risk and Coastal Defence Capital Programme to contribute to the delivery of phase 2 to complete the scheme. So hopefully that's a useful summary, and I'm happy to take any further questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. Presumably this has the support of the local community in Bucketsful, and also I noticed Councillor Kempji, the local member, is supportive of this project.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So that's good to hear. Martin, did you have something? I think you're down to speak against this. I know it's not your.
Oh no, I'm not. No. I mean, I suppose that I think it's great. Certainly, I've no intention of speaking against this, and it seems like a very well thought through and worked up plan with strong, which clearly meets an important need. I suppose the question that I have, and this is a discussion I raised earlier, is, is the pace of work increasing? Do we have the right level of resource that we need in the area of flooding? Maybe I don't want to overgeneralize from my experience as a divisional councillor in the west of Winchester, where we were told in the Section 19 report that a particular flooding event was only going to happen between every 29 and 42 years, and then 11 months later it turned up again. So that's sort of sending me alarm bells to say this may be an area where we're going to find takes a larger proportion of our resource, our effort, our focus, and where we need to be rethinking some of our policies. Because, for example, I mean, the one that I know, I mean, it may be in the grand scheme of things, it's not hugely important, but it does really irritate people when they've just had their homes flooded. That do we do enough proactive gully clearance on, you know, on drainage, on routes that we know cause flooding problems, and we have water flow maps and things like that which tells us which routes should get extra attention. So I suppose there's a wider policy question on flooding and a wider resource question on flooding, because we seem to be getting evidence that this is going to be a bigger problem, and we're going to have to get ahead of it somehow and be almost mainstreaming that resilience, which would have been an interesting area to it remains an interesting area to explore further to the previous conversation within the council's work.
Yeah, that's fair comments, and I can see Stuart smiling, and I'm going to invite him to comment. But I suppose for the residents of Chawton, this is 22 households and a significant A road that is being protected, but it's taken some years to gather that business case and deliver that match funding. So Stuart, I don't know if you want to comment on the sort of general resilience and gully clearance in this case.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Warwick. Yes, of course, gully maintenance hasn't really got anything to do with the brief and the agenda item that we're talking about in respect of this particular scheme. In general terms, so yes, we do constantly keep that under review, and I think we could always do with further resources, particularly to improve the capacity of drainage systems, particularly the older ones, to deal with the sort of changing climate that we have. But there's a balance to be struck there in terms of the funding that the County Council has and how that's defrayed across the various competing priorities. I think the only other point I'd make on funding is simply that the Environment Agency provide an increasingly reduced proportion of the cost of these schemes. And if it wasn't for Hampshire County Council's capital going in, these schemes wouldn't happen.
That's a fair comment. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stuart. Stephen, Councillor Philpott, did you want to add anything on this item?
No, thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you so much. So thank you, Paul. And Katie, I am happy to accept the recommendations on this report, which are laid out in paragraphs 2 to 4 on page 267. Thank you. And then finally moving to agenda item 13, which is a really interesting project, the Hampshire Reuse Service, which is laid out on pages 281 to 304. And this is about waste reduction and reuse. And Zoe Clegg is going to present this paper. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, Chairman. So this paper is seeking approval to take forward work on developing a trial to create a Hampshire Reuse Service. This project came about as a result of trialling various approaches to enable reuse through existing routes over the years with somewhat limited success. Taking into account reported impacts of the pandemic, we feel now is an appropriate time for the Council to set up such a service. The report includes a description of how we intend the trial to operate, noting where donated items would come from and how it would support local reuse charities. Progress is going well in setting up operations, and subject to approval from today's decision, the aim is to have the trial up and running early next year. Regarding the finances presented in the report, I can appreciate that while the costs on their own look high, we do expect some form of direct payback to offset costs through income generation and disposal savings, but at this point cannot reliably estimate on what scale these would be because it is a trial. We will also seek opportunities to minimise expenditure and cost increases over the trial period and are already making good progress on achieving this. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. That's really helpful. I've got Councillor Todd who wanted to speak and Councillor Philpott. So Martin, shall I come to you first as you registered to speak on this item?
Yes, and I think it's great. It's always great to see innovation and the council trying new things. I think I have two bits of perspective or two questions that and so I fully support moving ahead with a pilot. I have sort of one area that I'd just like to understand, and another question which has some wider policy implications. So in terms of understanding, the whole area of recycling is a very interesting one. And there's increasing use of the internet to enable free swapping of things and people giving stuff away, often through informal Facebook groups and apps and all kinds of different ways of going on. And I suppose a question I have is, and this is definitely valuable, and charities do very important work in this area, and it's good to support it and to be thinking about a more holistic approach as well. So I fully welcome that. But are we going to be seeing, making sure that we're making the intervention that solves problems that won't get solved in any other way through these sort of peer-to-peer type solutions and existing charity solutions, and making sure that the effort that we put in makes the biggest possible difference for the money we spend? And then I suppose the second point I'd say is charities are a very variable organizations. Some of them are huge, hundreds of millions of pounds. Most of them aren't, and are quite small and in some cases vulnerable and not used to dealing with the kind of systems and processes and whatever that local government sort of assumes from its partners. So we're used to dealing with, the Biffers and the Veolias and the Atkins and the people like that, and charities aren't like that. So I suppose a question to me is, how are we thinking about that in terms of the expectations we put upon them and how we work with them as partners, recognizing that their value is often that they're bringing in people who aren't, and involving volunteers and other people like that who aren't in the professional space, but bring an awful lot of connection with the community and a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And I suppose my question is, how are we reflecting that in how we're doing the work?
That was a very long question, Councillor Todd. Zoe, are you able to pick up on those two questions?
Definitely. Okay, so in terms of the existing routes for reuse, yes. I think we have spent a number of years exploring how reuse already operates, and have identified a gap whereby people, particularly who are under time pressures, for example, don't necessarily have access to large transport that enable them to take items suitable for use to existing routes or transport them to places where they could be reused. The intention here is to offer that kind of stopgap that would enable such people to pass on items for reuse in a timely manner, so that they don't necessarily have to wait for certain time periods where charities could collect them, but that we would provide that stop point, and then the charities could take these items as and when they are able to to meet based on their resources and their resources available. In terms of the charities, yes, we have spent a number of years engaging with our local charities to try and really understand their position, how they operate, where their cost pressures are. And we have even carried out a consultation with some of those that we have a relationship with to really understand how this solution could work for them. And some of the key financial pressures that we understand that these smaller charities in particular are under are in relation to storage, which again is why we have set this project up to enable that kind of stop point and storage capacity that they themselves don't have to incur the cost for, that we can provide, enable them to access the material at no cost, no extra cost to them.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zoe. Councillor Philpott.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be very brief, and just to say that about 5 hours ago, the Select Committee, the ET Select Committee, discussed the joint municipal waste management strategy, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of most of, if not all, of the members of that committee, and say I'm sure that they will welcome this pilot because it's very much in line with the strategy, especially paragraph or part 4.2 of the strategy, in terms of what we're attempting to achieve. So I have to say, very welcome news indeed. Good luck with the pilot when it gets going. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about this, and let's hope it's a great success. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Philpott. Councillor Humby or Councillor Oppenheimer, do you want to add anything at this stage?
No, just to say, Councillor, I very much support the paper, and I think it's a great initiative. So well done to the Zoe and the team.
Thank you, Councillor Humby. Councillor Oppenheimer.
I think it's also a fantastic initiative, and it will deepen our engagement and partnership working with a lot of local charities, and I think that will also bring other benefits in terms of waste minimisation. So I think it's an excellent project, and I look forward to getting the appraisal of the pilot scheme at some point.
Excellent. Thank you both. Thank you so much, Zoe. So good luck. Keep us posted. So Katie, finally then, I'm happy to accept the recommendations in paragraphs 2 to 4 on page 281. And that concludes my D-Day. So I'm handing back to Councillor Humby. Thank you.
Councillor Warwick, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you to you and Councillor Oppenheimer for going through your D-Day papers. I'd also like to thank all the officers, those that presented and those on the call as well. Specifically, I always forget to mention Sue and Susie and Katie, who keeps us all on track and organises everything. So a huge thank you to you. And to Stuart, thank you very much. It's great to see you back, and appreciate all the input as well. So thank you to all of you, very much appreciated, and to Councillor Philpott, sorry, for attending as well. And we'll formally bring the session to a close and ask the webcast to be stopped, Katie.